Very,
Yeah.
very good. Okay, so I was excited about hearing Mama Nkechi's presentation, but I heard that conversation about the uh, discourse around mental health. Do I have the capacity to share my screen? Can I share my screen? Is that possible?
I think if you look down at the bottom and
Very
try,
good.
there you go.
Oh,
Yeah.
very good. Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure that that was capability for this session. I wanted to make sure that we have a conversation again about this idea of IT and the process of understanding human functioning, right? So when we talk about this issue of a liberation of a population, I understand that first and foremost, the discourse was that has been that it was a penal colony by the French for the purpose of servitude of Europeans. It was, of course, in 1791 we have the Boukman, and so I'm to talk about Francois Macandal, who actually had a spiritual cry, a call out for the liberation of a population. And it's important to catch this because when we talk about this continuing oppression of a population and we talk about the dynamics of the healing and restoration of such, we see that it still ties back into a spiritual essence of what it means to be human. We have of course, coming on the heels of the French Revolution, the discussion was happening there when many of the enslaved were participating in that process. But we then go into this notion of this was one of the earlier cries of African people declaring themselves to be humans. And this is important because when I talk about the notion of health, healing, and restoration, I talk about a construct out of South Africa, Ubuntu, which speaks about being human. It is moving beyond the idea of being a being, but actually having essence and our spirit. And so it was this humanity, this cry out of profound African humanity that then led to the discussion of a liberation. And when doing research, as a matter of fact, I was just in IET just last year. I spoke with the Rabati Sante Mentale, the organization that looks at mental health and healing and restoration. I spoke to a group there about this very construct of what it means to organize oneself around their own ideas of what humanity is. It was there I learned that there was this process by which it was declared that if you desire to be human, you must take up a fight, and people were afraid to take up a fight. And so they said that all organisms on Earth have the capacity to defend themselves from the enemy. Why not you? And so the people were convinced that anything that you have is a tool, a weapon of war, whether it's a spoon, a fork, a knife, whatever it is, a tool is a tool of war. And that was that spirit that had got into them that said that we would be liberated. That since that time of liberation of 1804, there's been a suffrage of identity politics, the idea that the being less than human, being taxed by the French, and this is all over the African world. This issue of media portrayal of being less than, the educational system that moves one away from understanding who they are, and the this system continues. Of course, we know it's about the issue of trans um, generational trauma that has been perpetuated on the population from one generation to the next, and it is a part of the entire global African world. We know that some talk about this process or the outcome being what they talk about complex PTSD, the notion that one continues to experience such. But I asked the question, can Western thought give any diagnosis to an African phenomenon? And I suggest that it cannot because it is a part of the part of the force that has perpetuated the process of the trauma. So it cannot give the diagnosis of the issue of rape, torture, maiming, dehumanization, despiritualization processes. In South Africa, they use the term continuous traumatic stress. It says that those that were a part of the apartheid system, the Africans had a process by which the idea of trauma was continual. Others talk about post-traumatic slave disorder and stress disorder, post-traumatic, and I suggest that it can never be post. And so we have, of course, a very popular term about the theory of the post-traumatic slave syndrome. I advance that it's persistent enslavement systemic trauma because there is no way that you can have a post moment when you are perpetually experiencing the process of the trauma. Post means that you've gotten through it, that somehow you have moved beyond it. But if it is an ongoing process, a phenomena, then it's not a post moment. It is persistent. And so this is why we advance this idea of persistent enslavement systemic trauma. It impacts one on multiple levels. It is a mental, emotional, and physical level where it impacts what way one thinks, how one feels, and how one actually functions in the world. Some talk about the issue of cultural trauma, the idea of cultural trauma, meaning that as a function of having experienced trauma, there is something that belongs to an entire cultural group. And we can suggest at some level that this notion of trauma in the African experience has been one of a cultural one. The Haitian trauma is the same as all African traumas. The idea of control of every institution that one operates under, control of economics, control of education, the idea of not really been able to experience what it means to be human, being perpetually dehumanized. And so we talk about the persistent enslavement systemic trauma that continues to threaten and disrupt the existence of a population there. Having a chance to go to IET even before this last visit, and having had a chance to meet the wife of Jean Bertrand Aristide, and having received his book and having talked with him, but never not really meeting him, he reminds us of this idea of Ubuntu in his book called Haiti IT. And he says that Ubuntu has in it Ubuntu, Ubuntu, Gabantu, which means a person is a person through other human beings, or a person becomes a person because of the community, or a person is a person when he or she treats others well. It has been found to be a part of the a factor of African humanity, whether it is Hunu among the Shona, Muntu. You see the same concept over and over again. My grandmother said, "Don't let your name beat you back home. Don't make us look bad." So it was the same construct. So we see then that trauma has its impact on the body. It impacts and influences how the body functions. This is what we talk about, why the food insecurity is so important, because without proper nutrition, the body does not restore itself. And so we have the depletion or the increase of various neurotransmitters that actually are part of a stress process. Cortisol is one of those that's implicated in the process. And when you have increased cortisol within the bloodstream, it causes, which is caused by high stress, it causes plaque to build in the arteries. As this happens, we have coronary heart disease and hardening of arteries. And so then you end up with death caused by the trauma of surviving in the context of racism and oppression and human denigration. It causes the allostatic load to increase, which has been implicated in the process of high blood pressure. Glucose regulation is poor. Carbohydrates is there and implicated in diabetes, lower immune system, pre-existing conditions of ill health. And so this is all caused by the traumas of war. And again, we want to remind everyone that I suggest that the island of Haiti, land of the mountains, is a place of a penal colony of a population held over. And that's when we talk about prisoners of war, that's actually this process. And so we talk about the issue of the continuum. We see that as the war, the fight started for liberation of African people in IET about spirit, we see that that continues to be the phenomenon today. Even Dessalines is called an Ogu, a Dessalines, a spirit of war. And so this is a spiritual energy that continues to exist. Community is essential. This is a part of something that's highlighted in a forthcoming book that we have on Ubuntu psychotherapy. How do you do the work? How do you heal from that? With Ubuntu, it is the idea of humanity, tolerance, and respect. It is a return to a notion of African communocracy. We understand that all humans desire to be seen as sacred, to connect with others. We know that we are the seed of a seed of a seed of a seed of the seed. And so with that, we recognize that there's this idea of being expansive. They also have the term Umuntu, Gamuntu, Gabanya, Bantu, which says that a person's a person or express himself through others. Zulu have, of course, Ubuntu, Ugamutu, Ugabato, which means a person to person because of other people. This is, again, this profound notion of African communalism, the concept that everybody belongs to the collective. This is actually why we have this meeting today. Jomo Kenyatta reminds us that everybody is born with a connection to others. Desmond Tutu says that Ubuntu is the essence of what it means to be human. It means that even despite what you have experienced, you still can rise and be human because of knowing that you are divine. And Fukia reminds us that we are on the biogenetic rope. And I'm tying this together to talk about how do we talk about healing. He says that since we are the seed of a seed of a seed of a seed of this seed, that we are part of a biogenetic rope. That means that we are here, we're yet to be born, and those that have gone before us, and that we have this makolo. Makolo are knots that are tied onto this biogenetic rope. And our fundamental function is finding ways to untie such. And so this conversation today is about the untying of Makolo, a knot of inhumanity of African people, a knot of trying to figure out how to be human despite all those things that have come against one to make one believe that one is not human. The desire to connect, to feel connected, to be human, the desire to disrupt that which is disrupting one's reality, to disrupt the identity politics against Haitian people, which are part of the African continuum. We know that the population came from Dahomey, other places in West Africa. So we understand that there's a continuum that we're looking to engage in. In this process of African humanity restoration, we're then talking about taking control of one's physiological responses, how the body functions, the arousal process. How do we extend life through having better healthcare phenomena, the somatic awareness, being aware of one's emotions. I mean, this has been a perpetual disruption, and dysregulated lifestyle has to be addressed. And having spent time in IT and other places in the African world, clearly see a disruption of humanity caused by, of course, the incursion of European reality. So we have the trauma healing process. What has been attacked is not necessarily the body, but it's the essence of what it means to be human. Spirit has been attacked. As a matter of fact, the word psychology comes from a word psycho. Psycho means the essence of being, which ties back to spirit, not simply thoughts and mental processes, but the issue of what it means to be and one is imbued with something that came before it and that extends beyond it and that would live after it. So the healing occurs through a spiritual alignment process. And this is a deeper dive. And this is part of the Ubuntu work that Jean-Bertrand Aristide mentioned. This is what we talk about in our work as well. The spiritual alignment operates to connect one with the divine laws of the universe, but also understand that you are human. It is exactly what Boukman was saying, that you are something greater than simply being an object of somebody else's reality. And so it is a communal healing that we will look at, understanding that we are radiating in 7 different directions, that we're radiating forward, backwards, upwards, downward, sideways. And so this is a part of the idea of the trifold being. I'm past, present, and future, and I also move in 7 directions at all times. And so this idea that I'm connected to something around me, above me, and below me, which is consistent in the conversation about the healing and restoration of African people. And so Frantz Fanon asks the question, says that each generation out of relative obscurity must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. And so this call at this time is about how do we elevate and rise and fulfill this idea of the restoration of African humanity, looking at the dynamics of the Sankofa discourse. And the Sankofa discourse says that we must understand how to go back and get that which we have somehow lost due to the process of the Ma'afa, the great suffering of African people. We started from Ma'at first, this idea of righteousness and justice, and this is powerful where Mama Kitche will talk about it. But we know that the Ma'afa deals with this idea of what it means to be human. And so I will close by saying that we have to do exactly as Frantz Fanon suggests. We must rise up and fulfill our divine purpose, or betray it and be deemed to be insignificant in the forward flow of humanity. And it is not my duty, obligation, or desire to be seen as less than doing the work of being an Ogu or warrior for the liberation of our people. Thank you.
Dr. Washington, thank you very much. What a substantive presentation you have given us. trauma is such an important aspect of the conversation and all of the matters that you've identified as intersectionalities. I am now pleased to say that Dr. Taifa is with us. Dr. Vicky is going to bring up her voice at this time.